Hello, good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Donald C. Stewart and this is your news for today. We begin, as we always do, with the Ukrainian update on day 272. Ukraine is to evacuate civilians from recently liberated areas of the Kherson and Mykolaiv regions. Residents of the two southern regions have been advised to move to safer areas in the central and western parts of the country. This is amid fears that the damage to infrastructure caused by the war is too severe for people to endure the winter. Volodymyr Kudryavtsy, the head of Ukraine's national power grid operator Ukrenergo, has described the damage dealt to Ukrainian power generating facilities by Russian missile attacks as colossal. Ukrainians are likely to live with blackouts at least until the end of March, the head of major energy provider said on Monday, as the government started evacuating people from Kherson to other regions. Ukraine's SBU security service and police have raided a 1,000-year-old Orthodox Christian monastery in Kyiv as part of operations to counter suspected subversive activities by Russian special services. Russian shelling hit a humanitarian aid distribution centre in the town of Orhiv in southeastern Ukraine today, killing a volunteer and wounding two women, according to the regional governor, Alexander Staruk. The World Health Organization Regional Director for Europe, Dr. Hans-Henry P. Klug, has warned that Ukraine's health system is facing its darkest days in the war so far. Meanwhile, the European Union will give a further €2.5 billion to Ukraine for the reconstruction of the country, according to EU President Ursula von der Leyen. The German Chancellor, however, Olaf Scholz, has warned his country must be prepared for the situation in Ukraine to escalate. Ukraine's Prosecutor General's office has said its officials have identified 4 locations where Russian forces tortured detainees in Kherson city. Russians have allegedly murdered, tortured and kidnapped Ukrainians in a systematic pattern that could implicate top officials in Russia in war crimes, according to the US State Department's Ambassador for Global Criminal Justice. Meanwhile, Russian troops have been accused of burning bodies at a landfill on the edge of Kherson during their occupation. Residents and workers at the site reported to The Guardian that they saw Russian open trucks arriving to the site carrying black bags that were then set on fire, filling the air with a large cloud of smoke and a stench of burning flesh. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has said that there will be no more plans to call up more Russian soldiers to fight in Ukraine through a second round of mobilization. And in the United Kingdom, Ukrainian refugees are apparently experiencing difficulties in accessing private rented accommodation because they are unable to secure guarantors or references, according to the Office for National Statistics. And at home, in the context of strikes and looking for increased pay offers, a new progressive pay offer, the 4th, which has been made to unions, recognising the impact of the cost of living crisis and lower paid teachers with an increase of up to 6.85%, has been made today by the Scottish Government. For those classroom teachers on the main grade scale who benefit from pay progression, this offer will mean an increase in 1 year of over 10%. Those at the top of the scale will receive a 5% increase, taking their salary to £44,453 per annum. A teacher moving from probation into a fully qualified post would gain an annual salary increase of 27%. A fully qualified teacher in Scotland would receive £35,650, which is over £7,500 more than counterparts earn in England under this particular offer. The most experienced classroom teachers would receive £5,600 more than they would if they were teaching in England on the main pay grade. Overall, if accepted, this would represent a cumulative pay increase for the majority of teachers of 21.8% since 2018. It will mean a minimum increase of just under £2,000 or 5%, whichever is the higher, for those earning up to £60,000. Everybody earning over that amount will still receive a pay increase of £3,000. Education Secretary Shirley Ann Somerville commented that this is a fair offer which recognises that the cost of living crisis is the priority, with higher increases for staff on lower salaries. I have been clear, she continued, that we have limited room for manoeuvre. The financial situation for the Scottish Government is challenging, and additional money for teacher pay means reduced public services elsewhere, she warned. In these challenging times, she continued, it is important we focus our attention on those who are most impacted by the cost of living crisis, as well as ensuring fairness to all public sector workers. I would urge leadership to postpone plans for industrial action and consider this new offer. In the economy today, there was bad news for the UK government, as OECD has said that the United Kingdom will be the second weakest performer of the world's biggest economies next year. This came in a report looking at the global economy as it continues to suffer knock-on effects of the biggest energy shock in 4 decades, according to the leading international institution. The Paris-based Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, said only Russia, of the members of the G20 group of leading developed and developing nations, would suffer a bigger contraction than the United Kingdom in 2023. In its half-yearly economic outlook, the OECD said the UK economy would expand by 4.4% this year, the 6th fastest rate in the G20. But by next year, it would contract by 0.4%. Although most countries have had their growth forecasts cut by the OECD since June, only Russia's contraction of 5.6% is forecast to be more severe than the United Kingdom's. The poor performance is forecast to continue in 2024 with expansion of 0.2%, the joint weakest alongside Russia. Commenting, Alison Thewlis MP said, "It's very obvious what's happening here, and if the Tories don't want to admit it, their disastrous Brexit, coupled with their shambolic economics policies, are damaging the UK's economy, and setting us back on the world stage. In the firing line is Scotland's economy, which is being made to suffer the worst of Tory policies like Brexit and austerity that the people who live and work here voted overwhelmingly against. We need independence to secure an escape from this. Without the full powers of independence and membership of the European Union, a market 7 times larger than the United Kingdom, we can only trundle along as the UK underperforms against our neighbours and friends who've all managed to build back to pre-pandemic levels, a feat the United Kingdom is yet to manage." Meanwhile, speaking at the CBI conference today, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer issued a challenge to business leaders as he vowed to end what he called the short-term fix of using foreign workers to plug labour shortages, as he toughened up the Labour Party's stance on immigration. Mr Starmer said firms would face strict new conditions to boost skills and training among the domestic workforce, instead of being able to rely on the sticking plaster of recruiting from overseas. The SNP's Deputy Westminster leader Kirsten Oswald, commenting on Sir Keir Starmer's speech at the CBI, said that it was distressing to watch the Labour leader try to out-Tory the Tories again on Brexit and migration, and essentially tell the CBI that they are wrong. With both the Tories and Labour backing a hard Brexit and clamping down on migration, which we know Scotland and its businesses need, independence is the only way we can protect our economy. The Tories' extreme Brexit, backed by Labour, has been an unmitigated disaster. It has hammered Scotland's economy, hit our businesses and trade, and is one of the main reasons for the significant labour shortages we are seeing across the country right now. Further news today on the economy comes in the form of new research which reveals the stark reality of Scotland's economic outlook following from the OECD's report. New research has been published that shows almost 70% of people in Scotland are not turning the heating on and nearly 1 in 5 are skipping meals to save money. The research, which was published today by the David Hume Institute and the Diffley Partnership, has revealed the stark reality about Scotland and its economic outlook in the barest terms. Amongst the findings, and there are a number of statistics in here, so I hope you bear with me, 7 in 10, that being 68%, have already reported that they are not turning the heating on when they otherwise would have in Scotland. Nearly 1 in 5, which is 17% according to the report, of people have skipped meals in order to save money. Almost half, 48%, plan to spend less on clothing and footwear, which will obviously have a knock-on effect in terms of the economy and retail sales. 2 in 3 parents are dissatisfied with the ability of their income to cover the cost of their living. And more than 1/3 of parents are currently losing sleep due to financial stress. And in the biggest number, 93% of Scots in the survey believe that the general economic conditions now are worse than they were this time last year. And 77% believe the situation will deteriorate further over the coming year. The new Understanding Scotland polling has also found that 79% of people view the economy as it is currently organised as working primarily in the interests of the wealthy. Unsurprisingly, Karen Adam, SNP MP, commented every single bit of research coming out shows the shocking reality of how truly awful things are for people right now. And it is quite frankly disgraceful that none of it seems to have an impact on the Tories' response. As a result of the Tories recklessly pursuing their damaging right-wing agenda and Labour falling in line in their desperate attempt to win back Tory seats, people across Scotland are being left with no other option but to keep the heating off and skip meals because everyday living costs hit unaffordable levels. It is deplorable. The SNP Scottish Government is acting where it can with the powers at its disposal to support those who need it most with game-changing policies like the Scottish Child Payment. But its efforts are undermined by heartless Westminster governments. In terms of energy, today further news that's quite bleak in terms of Ofgem telling UK energy suppliers that they are failing vulnerable customers. Energy companies are failing vulnerable companies according to Britain's energy watchdog, and they have called for urgent improvement ahead of a cold winter. Ofgem told all 17 energy suppliers in its third review into the sector to improve their support for customers, in particular vulnerable ones. It found severe weaknesses in 5 suppliers, being Good Energy, Outfox, So Energy, True Energy and Utilita. Moderate weaknesses were found in 5 other companies: E for gas and electricity, Ecotricity, Octopus, Shell and Green Energy UK. Minor weaknesses were discovered in the remaining 7 companies, including the biggest supplier, British Gas, as well as Bulb, EDF, E.ON, OVO, Scottish Power and Utility Warehouse. Neil Lawrence, the Director of Retail at Ofgem, said, "From eligible customers who are missing out on free gas safety checks through to companies not identifying vulnerable customers to be offered obvious support on the Priority Services Register, this robust review has highlighted that suppliers need to do more to support consumers." Ofgem said examples of poor practice, including suppliers not reading the meters of vulnerable customers who could not do so themselves, setting debt repayment rates so high that vulnerable customers self-disconnect because their prepayment meters run out, and vulnerable customers not being able to get through when they are off supply to top up their meter or request additional support credit. Households are paying an average of £2,500 a year, which will go up to £3,000 a year next year in April under the government's energy price cap. Moving on now to the asylum centre Manston, which is now empty after weeks of controversy, the troubled Home Office site in Kent, where people arriving in the UK in small boats were taken for initial checks, is now completely empty. Just a few weeks ago, about 4,000 arrivals were placed there by the Home Office, almost 3 times the maximum 1,600 capacity of the tented site, which is near Ramsgate. Today, Prime Minister's official spokesman said Manston by design is meant to be a temporary holding facility where people are processed before moving on, normally fairly quickly. Obviously, there were immediate challenges, particularly after the attack at the other centre, which caused numbers to spike. So you would expect numbers to be relatively low on a daily basis as people are moved through quickly. The Public and Commercial Services Union and the Charity Detention Action, 2 of the organisations bringing a legal challenge about conditions at Manston, welcomed the news. James Wilson, the Deputy Director of Detention Action, said, "The Home Secretary has only taken steps to address her serious failures at Manston after our urgent legal challenge and widespread public condemnation. Potentially, thousands of people may be legally entitled to compensation for their treatment at Manston, and we are calling for an independent inquiry into conditions at the facility to be held." Paul O'Connor of the PCS said, "The conditions at Manston that refugees and our members have had to endure recently have been a disgrace. We are pleased that the Home Secretary has been forced to respond to our concerns, but we should not have needed to resort to the threat of legal action before they were addressed." The news comes after a series of controversies at the site, including claims of drug selling by guards, outbreaks of infectious diseases such as diphtheria, the stranding of asylum seekers in central London after their release from Manston, and tragically, the death of an asylum seeker placed there on Saturday. The Office of the Prisons and Probation Ombudsman has confirmed it is investigating the death of the man who arrived in the UK in a small boat on the 12th of November. His details have not yet been released, and it is understood that the Home Office is still trying to contact his next of kin. Alongside this investigation, the Independent Office for Police Conduct has received a referral from the Home Office about the death. It told The Guardian it was too early to say whether this would result in an investigation. Of course, such investigations involving the Home Office are rare. The last was in 2018, 4 years ago, following the death of a 23-year-old Sudanese man at a car wash in Newport while he fell from a height following an immigration raid. The Kent coroner has confirmed receipt of a referral about the case and is in the early stages of investigating it. And of course, for those of us who have been glued to the television over the football, it has not been without its controversy, and today reports are coming out that at least one team may fear reprisals, and that is the Iranian footballers who may face those reprisals for not singing the national anthem at the World Cup. They have been told that they may face those reprisals if they fail to sing the national anthem in the remaining World Cup group games after a politician said the country will never allow anyone to insult our anthem. The football team stayed silent while the anthem was played before their defeat 6-2 to England on Monday in a symbolic show of support for the protest movement that has rolled in Iran since the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini in police custody in September of this year. Team Melli, as the national team is known, had previously drawn criticism from those very protesters for even competing in Qatar, and footage of them bowing in front of President Ebrahim Raisi at a send-off meeting drew even more anger. On Tuesday, Mehdi Charmran, the chairman of Tehran City Council, said, "We will never allow anyone to insult our anthem and flag. Iranian civilization has a history of several thousand years. This civilization is as old as the total of European and American civilizations." One Iranian Conservative MP called for the national team to be replaced by faithful and revolutionary youth willing to sing their national anthem. Iran's Heavily censored media made very little mention of the team not singing the national anthem. Kaihan, probably the newspaper closest to the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, vented its fury at the way in which protesters had cheered an English victory, saying, "For weeks, foreign media had conducted ruthless and unprecedented psychological media war against this team." Inside Iran, the cycle of protests, repressions, funerals, internet shutdowns and strikes have continued. The most intense protests are currently in Iranian Kurdistan, where the human rights group Hengo reported that 7 people had been killed since Sunday in Yavan Roud alone, and that the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps had started using heavy military armoury and live ammunition to quell the protests. On Tuesday, today, thousands of Kurds attended the funeral of a 16-year-old boy, Karwan Shukri, killed the previous night in Parhan Shah. Moving back to Scotland, and news today that the minimum unit pricing has reduced alcohol consumption in Scotland. It is achieving one of its key aims, according to ministers, after a new report concluded that it had been effective in cutting alcohol consumption. Looking at the first 3 years since its reduction, new research by Public Health Scotland and the University of Glasgow has concluded that the policy is reducing overall sales. The level of minimum unit pricing is currently under review, and a consultation on restrictions on the marketing of alcohol to help drive down further hazardous consumption is already underway. Public Health Minister Marie Todd said, "I welcome this report, which shows that minimum unit pricing has been effective in creating a 3% net reduction in total alcohol sales in the first 3 years of implementation. This important conclusion takes account of other factors such as the impact of the pandemic in alcohol sales, seasonal variations, existing trends, household income, and comparison with England and Wales, where MUP was not in place. It is achieving what it set out to do, a reduction in sales overall with a focus on the cheap high-strength alcohol, which is often drunk by people drinking at harmful levels." Further studies on MUP, including a final evaluative report, which is due next year, will examine how it has impacted on the general harm caused by alcohol. Furthermore, in terms of crime, recorded crime in Scotland has fallen below pre-pandemic levels. Crime recorded by police remains lower than before the pandemic, according to new statistics which have been released today, reflecting a long-term trend of fewer victims and people feeling safer within their communities. The latest National Statistics Recording Crime in Scotland bulletin shows recording crime is 4% down since the year ending September 2018, falling 42% in total since 2006-2007. Overall, recorded crime is at one of the lowest levels seen for a 12-month period since the mid-1970s, 1974 to be precise. The overall reduction in recorded crime is reflected in the Scottish Crime and Justice Survey for 2019-20, which shows that people living in Scotland are less likely to be victims of crime than in England and Wales. Justice Secretary Keith Brown commented, "The latest figures today show Scotland continues to be a safe place to live. Recorded crime is at one of its lowest levels, seen since 1974 and below pre-pandemic levels, meaning the vast majority of people do not experience crime. While there are fewer victims compared to 2007, we continue to strengthen support for those who experience crime and to promote work to reduce reoffending. This includes proposals to introduce an independent victims commissioner, making sure victims' voices are heard and placing women and children at the heart of delivery. Continuing to reduce crime and the harm it causes both individuals and our society as a whole is central to our ambitious vision to reform our justice system. These historically low levels of crime are testimony to the continued efforts across the justice sector as we continue to deliver a safer Scotland for everyone." Further news in terms of the Scottish Government within each of our communities came today with the news that they have introduced a wellbeing economy toolkit for local authorities. Improvements to health, tackling child poverty and reaching climate goals are at the heart of this toolkit, designed to support local economies to be fairer, greener, healthier and more resilient. The Wellbeing Economy Toolkit, supporting place-based economic strategy and policy development, enables local authorities to identify and measure local wellbeing metrics, including health, child poverty, levels of greenhouse gas emissions and fair work, and prioritise investment and policies to improve them. This will include the creation of more high-quality, sustainable local jobs by using more local and regional procurement contracts, improve transport links to help people access services and work, better access to the natural environment, which leads to better mental and physical health. The Constitution Secretary announced the toolkit at the Wealth of Nations 2.0 conference at the University of Glasgow. He was joined by representatives from fellow Wellbeing Economy governments, known as WEGO, of Finland and Wales, to take questions from young people 5 years on from the first conversations to establish the network. Constitution Secretary Angus Robertson commented, "The need for a new economic model has never been clearer, and that's why I think the wellbeing economy approach is gaining so much interest both here and around the world. We see that in the growth of WEGO, the network of wellbeing economy governments, which began as a coalition of Scotland, Iceland and New Zealand. Since this event was last held in 2020, 2 more governments, Finland and Wales, have joined, and other countries, including Canada, are showing a growing interest. Creating a wellbeing economy remains a defining mission for the Scottish Government, and it is my firm belief that Scotland can use the powers of independence to achieve that aim more fully." Well, that is us for this evening. But before I go, I just want to remind you that here at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of all our supporters. So to everyone who's donated and to everyone who's signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. Now, as well as that, there is the plea that if you're on social media and you find us on social media, please, please, please make us more known throughout your own social media network so that our ambitious target of adding 10,000 new subscribers to enable us to employ staff to make more programmes is more likely to happen. But in the meantime, from me here in the studio at Broadcasting Scotland, thank you very much for joining this evening.